At our divorce hearing, my wife testified. I gave up my dreams to support his career. I deserve compensation. Her lawyer painted me as controlling. Then I played ring camera footage of her bringing men home while I was at work. The judge just asked, "What dreams were you pursuing exactly?" I, 34 am, sat in the courtroom that morning watching my wife's lawyer paint me as some kind of controlling monster, and honestly, part of me wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all. The other part wanted to throw up. 5 years of marriage, reduced to this theatrical performance where I was suddenly the villain in a story I didn't recognize. Her lawyer was good, I'll give him that. He paced in front of the judge, gesturing dramatically as he described how my ex had sacrificed everything for my career, how she'd given up her dreams to support mine, how she deserved substantial compensation for her years of selfless devotion. My lawyer had warned me this was coming, but hearing it out loud still felt like getting punched in the gut. The judge asked her to elaborate on these sacrifices, and that's when she really got going. She told the court about how she'd wanted to start her own business, something creative and fulfilling, but had put it on hold to manage our household while I climbed the corporate ladder. She talked about lonely evenings and missed opportunities, her voice cracking at all the right moments. She claimed I'd controlled the finances, made all the decisions, isolated her from friends and family. According to her testimony, I was a manipulative spouse who'd built my success on her broken dreams. I sat there listening to this fiction, my hands gripping the edge of the table. My lawyer touched my arm gently, reminding me, without words, to stay calm. We'd prepared for this. We had our response ready. The thing is, I'm a senior project manager at a construction firm. Good job, decent money, but I'm not exactly rolling in wealth. I work hard, long hours sometimes, but I'd never asked her to give up anything. When we got married, she was working as a receptionist at a dental office. She'd talked vaguely about wanting to do something more, maybe event planning or interior design, but there were never concrete plans. No business proposals, no courses, no actual steps toward any dream. Just talk. Within a year of marriage, she quit her job, said the commute was too stressful, the dentist was demanding, she needed a break. I'd supported that decision. I told her to take her time, figure out what she wanted, maybe take some classes. We could afford it on my salary if we were careful. She'd seemed relieved and grateful. But the break never ended. The classes never happened. Instead, she settled into a routine of sleeping late, meeting friends for lunch, shopping, binge-watching shows. When I'd gently ask about her plans, she'd get defensive, say she was still figuring things out, that I was pressuring her. So I stopped asking. I figured everyone moves at their own pace. I was working 60-hour weeks sometimes, traveling for projects. Having her manage the home side of things seemed like a reasonable division of labor. The first real crack appeared about 2 years in. I came home early one Thursday. Some site inspection got canceled. Her car was in the driveway, but she wasn't answering her phone. I found her upstairs in our bedroom with some guy I'd never seen before. They were scrambling to get dressed when I walked in. She cried, apologized, said it was a mistake, swore it would never happen again. The guy practically ran out of the house. I should have left then. I know that now. But I believed her tears, believed her promises. We went to counseling for a few months. She said she'd been feeling neglected, that my work schedule made her feel alone. I cut back my hours where I could. I tried to be more present. The counselor told us we needed better communication, more quality time together. We both nodded and agreed. Things seemed better for a while. Or maybe I was just willfully blind. I wanted to believe we could fix it. I'd meant those vows I took. For better or worse and all that. Then about 6 months ago, I started noticing things. Small things at first. She'd be on her phone constantly, tilting the screen away when I entered the room. She started wearing more makeup on random weekdays. New clothes appeared in her closet. When I asked about them, she said she'd had them forever or got them on sale. One night, I couldn't sleep and went downstairs for water. Her phone was charging on the kitchen counter and lit up with a message notification. I shouldn't have looked, I know. Invasion of privacy and all that. But something in my gut told me to check. The message was from someone saved as just a first name, saying they'd had a great time that afternoon and couldn't wait to see her again. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the conversation. Explicit messages. Photos. Plans to meet up when I was at work. This wasn't the first person either. There were multiple conversations like this, going back months. Different names, similar content. I took screenshots, sent them to myself, deleted the evidence of my snooping. Then I went upstairs and looked at her sleeping face and wondered who the hell I'd married. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed to think. I needed a plan. The next day, I called a divorce lawyer. He listened to my situation and gave me practical advice. Document everything. Gather evidence. Don't make any sudden moves that could be seen as aggressive or controlling. File properly when the time was right. I also did something I'm not entirely proud of, but don't regret. I installed Ring cameras. One covering the front door, one in the living room facing the entrance, one in the backyard. I told her about them, said I wanted better security after there'd been some break-ins in nearby neighborhoods. She barely reacted, just shrugged, and said whatever made me feel safer. Those cameras became my evidence collection system. Over the next few months, they recorded her bringing different men home regularly, usually in the afternoons. They'd arrive, she'd let them in, they'd head upstairs. A few hours later they'd leave. Sometimes the same guy would come back multiple times. Sometimes it was someone new. I watched it all remotely from my phone while I was sitting in project meetings or on construction sites. Each notification felt like another small death of the marriage I'd thought I had. But I kept watching, kept documenting, kept playing the role of the oblivious husband. I also hired a private investigator, just to be thorough. He confirmed what the cameras showed and added more details. Lunches at hotels. Afternoon drinks at bars across town. She'd created this whole secret life. When I finally filed for divorce, she seemed genuinely shocked. She cried and asked why. What had happened to us? Couldn't we work on it? I told her I knew about the affairs. Plural. She denied it at first, then admitted to one mistake. Then when I pressed, maybe two, but they meant nothing. She still loved me. I just handed her the papers and told her to get a lawyer. I moved into a corporate apartment my company sometimes used for out-of-town contractors. Started the waiting period for the divorce to process. That's when her strategy apparently shifted from reconciliation to compensation. Her lawyer filed a response claiming she deserved significant alimony and a large portion of my retirement accounts and savings. The narrative became about her sacrifices, my controlling behavior, her abandoned dreams. Sitting in that courtroom listening to her testimony, I felt weirdly calm. Maybe because I knew what was coming. Maybe because I'd already grieved this marriage during those months of watching her betray it over and over. When she finally finished her tearful account of how I'd ruined her life by making her a kept woman, the judge turned to my lawyer and asked if we had any response to these claims. My lawyer stood up and said we did. He requested permission to present video evidence that was relevant to the question of marital conduct and the claims being made about my client's controlling behavior. Her lawyer objected immediately. Irrelevant, prejudicial, inflammatory. The judge asked what the videos showed. My lawyer explained they were security camera footage from our marital home, showing my wife's activities during the marriage. The judge allowed it, warning it better be relevant. We'd edited the footage down to about 15 minutes. Just the highlights, so to speak. Time-stamped clips showing her letting various men into our house. Then those same men leaving hours later. Different days, different men. The camera angles were clear enough to show faces, body language, the intimate way she touched them at the door. The courtroom was silent except for the audio from the videos. I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on the judge, watching his expression shift from neutral to something harder, more knowing. When the video ended, the judge sat back in his chair. He looked at my ex, then at her lawyer, then back at her. Then he asked that question, the one that's now the most satisfying sentence I've ever heard another human speak. He asked her what dreams exactly she'd been pursuing while I was at work. The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. Her lawyer tried to object, said the question was argumentative. The judge overruled him and repeated the question. What dreams had she been pursuing? She stammered something about personal growth and finding herself. The judge asked if any of the men in the videos were business partners or instructors in classes she was taking. She went pale and quiet. Her lawyer tried to redirect, argued that marital misconduct wasn't relevant in our state's no-fault divorce system. He was technically right, but the judge's tone had changed completely. He said while misconduct might not affect the divorce itself, it was absolutely relevant to claims about who sacrificed what in the marriage. He asked her directly if she'd been employed at any point in the last 3 years. She admitted she hadn't. He asked if I'd prevented her from working. She said no, but that I'd made her feel like she needed to manage the household. He asked if managing our household included regular afternoon visitors while I was at work. Her lawyer objected again, sustained this time, but the point was made. Then the judge turned to the financial documents. My lawyer had prepared a detailed breakdown of our spending during the marriage. I'd never controlled the finances in the way she claimed. We had a joint account I deposited my paychecks into. She had a credit card connected to that account with no spending limit I'd imposed. The statements showed regular charges at restaurants, boutiques, spas, salons. Thousands of dollars a month on personal expenses while I packed the same lunch every day and drove a 10-year-old truck. The records showed I'd actually encouraged her to pursue education or training. There was a tuition payment for a community college course she'd registered for but never attended. A charge for photography equipment she'd said she wanted to start a business with, but that ended up just sitting and used in our closet. A deposit for a small business workshop she'd signed up for then canceled. Every claim she'd made about sacrificing her dreams looked hollow against the evidence. She'd had every opportunity and resource. She just hadn't wanted to do the work. Easier to spend my money and fill her time with affairs. The hearing ended without a ruling that day, but the damage was done. Over the next few weeks, negotiations changed completely. Her lawyer dropped most of the compensation demands. We settled for a clean split of current assets with no ongoing alimony. She got half the value of our house and cars, which was fair enough. I kept my retirement accounts intact since I'd started contributing to them before we married, and she'd never worked during our marriage. The whole process took about 8 months total from filing to final decree. She moved out of state almost immediately after, back to where her parents lived. I heard through mutual acquaintances she told everyone I'd blindsided her with divorce out of nowhere, that I was vindictive and cruel. The people who mattered knew the truth. The rest could think whatever they wanted. Update 1. The divorce was finalized 3 months ago. I thought that would be the end of it, that we'd go our separate ways and I could start rebuilding my life. I was wrong. About 2 weeks after the final decree, I started getting messages from a number I didn't recognize. At first, they were almost apologetic in tone. She said she understood I was hurt, but that we'd both made mistakes in the marriage. She wanted to talk, to get closure, to part as friends. I blocked the number without responding. Then she tried email. Similar messages, progressively more desperate. She claimed she'd realized what she'd lost, that the other men had meant nothing, that she'd been going through something and needed therapy. She said she was getting help now, working on herself, and hoped I could forgive her someday. I set up a filter to send her emails straight to trash. When digital methods didn't work, she showed up at my apartment. I'd moved into a decent one-bedroom place across town, closer to my office. I came home from work one evening, and she was sitting in her car in the parking lot. She got out when she saw me, started walking toward me saying we needed to talk. I told her we had nothing to discuss, that the divorce was final, and she needed to leave. She started crying, saying I was being cold, that we'd shared 5 years together and that had to mean something. I repeated that she needed to leave or I'd call the police. She finally got back in her car, but sat there for another 20 minutes before driving away. I documented everything. Screenshots of the messages, security footage of her showing up. I sent it all to my lawyer asking what my options were. He drafted a cease and desist letter, formal and legal, telling her to stop all contact or face harassment charges. That worked for about a month. Then things got weirder. I started hearing from old friends, people I hadn't talked to in a while. Apparently, she'd been reaching out to mutual acquaintances, telling a very different version of events. In her story, I'd been having an affair with someone at work. She'd found out and confronted me. I'd turned it around on her, fabricated evidence, manipulated the court system. She was the victim of an elaborate gaslighting campaign. The people who knew me well didn't believe it. But some of the more peripheral friends, people who only knew us casually, seemed to buy her version. I started seeing my social circle split. Some awkward conversations happened where people would fish for my side of things. I mostly declined to engage. The people who mattered had been at the hearing or knew the truth. Everyone else wasn't worth the energy. Then she went after my job. She somehow found out the name of my company's HR director and sent a detailed email claiming I'd been abusive during our marriage, that I had anger management issues, that she was concerned about my mental stability and thought my employer should know. The email was vague enough to avoid outright lies, but clearly designed to damage my reputation. My HR director, thankfully, called me directly. She said they'd received concerning correspondence from my ex-wife and wanted to hear my perspective before taking any action. I brought in my lawyer. We provided the full divorce documentation, including the evidence that had been presented in court. We explained the pattern of contact and harassment since the divorce. The HR director was understanding. She documented everything, assured me this wouldn't affect my employment, and said if my ex contacted the company again, they'd take legal action. She also suggested I consider getting a restraining order. I'd been avoiding that step, thinking it seemed extreme. But my lawyer agreed it was time. The pattern was escalating. First contact attempts, then showing up in person, then spreading false stories, now trying to interfere with my employment. What came next? We filed for a protective order. The hearing was surreal in a different way than the divorce. She actually showed up and contested it. Her lawyer argued she'd just been trying to get closure, that I was overreacting, that showing up once at my apartment wasn't stalking. But we had documentation. The judge granted a year-long protective order. No contact, direct or indirect. Had to stay 500 feet away from my home and workplace. I thought maybe that would finally be the end. Legal consequences tend to make people think twice. And it was quiet for a while. A few weeks passed without incident. I started to relax a little, focus on my work, spend time with friends, go on a few dates even though I wasn't really ready. Then I got a call from my bank. Suspicious activity on my account. Someone had attempted to use my information to open a credit card. The attempt was flagged and denied, but the bank wanted to confirm I hadn't made the application. I hadn't. I asked for details. The application had come from an IP address traced to a public library in the town where my ex had moved. Some of the personal information was correct, some wasn't, like they were working from partial knowledge of my details. I filed a police report for identity theft, added it to the growing file of documentation. My lawyer sent another letter to her lawyer. The message was clear. This needed to stop or criminal charges would follow. That was a month ago. It's been quiet since then. No contact attempts, no new incidents. I don't know if she finally got the message or if she's just regrouping for the next attempt. I've learned not to trust the quiet. Update 2. I'm writing this from a hotel room in a city 3 states away, here for a work conference. It's been almost 5 months since the protective order was granted, and I'd started to believe maybe she'd finally moved on. I was wrong again. Last week, I got a notification from my home security system. Motion detected at my front door at 2 in the morning. I was in bed, but grabbed my phone to check the camera feed. Someone in a dark hoodie was standing at my door, face mostly hidden. They stood there for about 30 seconds, then left something on my doormat and walked away. I called the police immediately. Waited inside until an officer arrived. The package on my doorstep was a manila envelope, no return address, just my name written in handwriting I recognized. The officer photographed everything before we opened it. Inside was a collection of photos from our marriage. Wedding pictures, vacation snapshots, candid moments from happier times. Each photo had been defaced. My face scratched out or marked over with black marker. On the back of each photo, she'd written messages. Some were angry, calling me names, accusing me of destroying her life. Others were almost loving, talking about the good times we'd had, what we could have been. The officer took the envelope as evidence. Clear violation of the protective order. They went to her parents' house, where she'd been living. She wasn't there. Her mother claimed she didn't know where she was, that she'd left a few days ago, saying she needed to clear her head. That was concerning. If she wasn't at her parents' place, where was she? And had she really driven several states over just to leave photos at my door in the middle of the night? I increased my security. Added cameras covering every angle of my apartment. Started varying my schedule, taking different routes to work. My lawyer filed to extend the protective order and add stricter terms. The police opened an investigation. Then things got really bad. 3 days ago, I got a call from my younger sister. She lives about an hour away, teaches elementary school, has 2 kids. She said a woman had approached her in the parking lot of her school, claimed to be doing research for a book about dysfunctional marriages, wanted to interview her about her experiences with her brother's behavior. My sister, thankfully, is sharp. She told the woman she had no comment and to leave. But she recognized my ex from photos she'd seen. She called me immediately, then called the school security. My ex approaching my family member, especially at a school, especially after violating the protective order already, was the final line. My lawyer contacted the prosecutor's office. They agreed to file criminal charges. stalking, harassment, violation of a protective order. Actual criminal charges with potential jail time. The police located her 2 days ago. She'd been staying at a motel about 20 miles from my apartment. When they searched her room, they found more photos of me, printouts of my social media posts, notes about my daily schedule that were disturbingly detailed. She'd been watching me, tracking my movements, building some kind of obsessive documentation. She was arrested and is currently being held pending a bail hearing. Her lawyer is arguing she's not dangerous, just heartbroken and not handling the divorce well. The prosecutor is arguing she's escalating, becoming more unpredictable, and poses a genuine threat. I had to give a statement. Had to sit across from a detective and detail every incident, every contact attempt, every escalation. Had to admit that I'm genuinely afraid of what she might do next. The detective was kind but direct. He said in his experience, this pattern of behavior doesn't usually de-escalate on its own. People who do these things, they're not rational. They've built up a narrative in their head where they're the victim and the target of their obsession is the villain. Facts don't matter to that mindset. The bail hearing is tomorrow. The prosecutor is going to request she remain in custody or at minimum be required to wear a GPS monitor and have additional restrictions. My lawyer will be there to represent my interests. I've been thinking a lot about how we got here. About that woman I married 5 years ago, whether I ever really knew her at all. The person who's been stalking me, leaving threatening photos, approaching my family. She doesn't seem like the same person I exchanged vows with. But maybe the signs were always there. The impulsiveness, the inability to take responsibility, the need for constant attention and validation. I'm exhausted, not just physically, though I'm not sleeping well. Mentally and emotionally drained from being constantly vigilant, from having to document and report every incident, from wondering when the next shoe will drop. My sister asked if I regret installing those Ring cameras, regret presenting that evidence in court, regret making the divorce so definitive. She wondered if maybe being less confrontational would have led to a cleaner break. I told her no. I don't regret exposing the truth. If I'd let her paint me as the controlling spouse, let her take a huge settlement she didn't deserve, would that have made her less obsessive? I doubt it. She'd probably still be contacting me, still be trying to maintain some connection. At least this way I know who she really is. At least I have documentation of everything. The truth is, I just want this to be over. I want to be able to go to work without checking over my shoulder. Want to be able to have a normal conversation with friends without wondering if she's contacted them with more lies. Want to think about maybe dating again without worrying about putting someone else at risk. The prosecutor told me today that based on the evidence, he's confident she'll face consequences. Probably probation at minimum, possibly some jail time, depending on how the judge views the severity. Mandatory mental health treatment. Extended protective orders with serious penalties for violations. I hope he's right. I hope this finally ends. But I'm not counting on anything anymore. I've learned that much at least. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or story ideas, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.